Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into American political origins and evolving institutions. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill Obrien. He's also your host for this continuing conversation. Here he is now, Dr. Bill Obrien.
Well, thank you, Agnes, and welcome to this Wednesday edition of the Virtual Center for Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Today is the day before Thanksgiving. It is date-wise, I believe, it is the 21st day. I don't have a calendar right in front of me. I think today's the 21st, and tomorrow Thanksgiving is the 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. And it is a pleasure to be with you, and let me take this opportunity to wish everybody a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. We didn't do a live program yesterday, as you know, because we celebrated Thanksgiving yesterday because my wife, as I speak right now, is on the road. She's driving up to New England to spend Thanksgiving with her grandchildren, and it's one of those quickie round trips. She's driving up today, and she'll be back on Saturday. So, but anyway, so we decided that we would have our Thanksgiving dinner early. We had friends come over, and we had Thanksgiving dinner yesterday, which is the reason we didn't do a live program. We had a wonderful time. It was everything Thanksgiving ought to be, I think. Just so happened that the person we brought over, along with her two girls, it was a birthday. So we had that in addition to celebrate yesterday. So it was wonderful. And we had a great time, a lot of laughs, taking selfies and all of these things. It was just great. Put a number of the photo. Well, we didn't, but our guest, our friend did. She put a number of these photographs on Facebook, and it was kind of fun this morning my wife and I, just to look at them. So anyway, I do hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. It's a feel-good holiday, if you know what I mean. And of course, the problem is that there are so many people, not only in this country but around the world, who are not in a feel-good situation, and we know that. One of the most, to be honest with you, and this really touched me, and I want to mention it because I think it's worth noting. About 2 hours ago, as I was kind of looking at the cable networks before I got ready for the program, and I just was trying to get one last thing, making sure that anything was going on. And one of the things that was posted, which I thought was wonderful, was that the crew of the Today Show was in California preparing Thanksgiving dinner for the firefighters in Northern California. And oh my heavens, that just hit me. And I said, my God, what a wonderful thing to do. And I mean, they obviously they come equipped with all. I mean, they can do it. But the fact of the matter is to even think about these folks who've worked so hard against such tremendous odds, and giving them an opportunity to sit down, them and their families to sit down and enjoy Thanksgiving dinner as well. I just think it caught me by surprise, I guess, and I just said, "Oh my heavens, that's wonderful! That's exactly what this holiday is about," and I just loved it. And of course, I did see videos of President Obama working at a kitchen in Chicago yesterday, which he's done apparently a number of years in a row, and I had forgotten that. So that kind of gave me a good feeling too. But it's just that kind of a holiday. It's a kind of a holiday where you begin to appreciate other people. Again, we know that not everybody does, but you begin to consider other people ahead of yourself. And maybe that's what the real message of Thanksgiving is. Anyway, I hope that you have a wonderful day. And please know that Bob, Kincaid, Agnes, and the folks on that end, and myself included, we're having a great day, and we'll have a great day tomorrow. I know Bob and Agnes and their family will. But the fact of the matter is, the reason that our day is as pleasant and enjoyable as it is in large part because of the folks who support this network and support this program. It's because of you that we really think that this Thanksgiving is special. And we want to thank you for it. And I just hope that you have a wonderful day. Let me please encourage you to, if you are so inclined, to pick up the phone and share your thoughts with us. They can be thoughts about Thanksgiving. They can be thoughts about the Trump administration. They can be thoughts about, whatever subject happens to tickle your fancy, if you will, on this day before Thanksgiving. We would love to hear from you. We have two numbers, either of which you can call, and it will get you into the studios, and Agnes will get you on the air immediately. The first number, both of them are the same area code, by the way, 304. The first number is area code 304-574-8178. 304-574-8178. The other number is same area code, 304-640-2829. 304-640-2829. If you'd like to share your thoughts with me personally, either in an email or on our Facebook page, then we invite you to do that as well. And I'll kind of try to be the judge. If what you're saying is something that I think our other listeners would benefit from and ought to hear, then I'll be glad to get it on the air for you, and I'll do the very best I can to represent you. Of course, we would prefer that you come on the air and do it yourself. That would be the ideal. But we can't ultimately assume that the world only has ideals or zeros. And hearing from you would be a tremendous honor for us, however you choose to communicate with us. If you would like to send me an email, let me give you my email address. It's waobrien906@gmail.com. That's waobrien, OBRIEN 906@gmail.com. Or if you'd like to communicate with me via our Facebook page, that may be for many people the most direct way, because many of us are on Facebook 2 or 3 times a day anyway. If you go to Facebook, facebook.com, which is the homepage, in the search box at the top of the homepage, just type in the Virtual Center for Study of the Constitution. You'll be onto our Facebook page, and you'll see a number of postings there. And after each posting, there are 2 links, a comment link and a share link. If you click the share link, that particular posting is shared among everybody on your friendship list, all your friends, Facebook friends. And obviously, if you do that, we'd appreciate it. If you think enough of the posting to share it with your other Facebook friends, then we really appreciate that. But if you click the comment button, it gives you an opportunity to make a direct comment to me. I get a notice on my Facebook page that someone has commented on one of the postings on the Facebook page, and when I click it, I get the particular posting, and then I get your comment. Obviously, the assumption is that your comment would be related to the posting, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You can use it as a direct communication with me, and I'd be honored to receive it and do the best I can to represent you and get your thoughts on the air, so that we can basically give other people the opportunity and the benefit of sharing in some of your thoughts. The point is, the more communication we can engage in, the better. We would love to hear from you. We hope you'll avail yourself of the 2 phone lines that are available. But again, an email is fine. A comment on the Facebook page is fine. Whatever works for you works for us. All I want you to know is how much we appreciate your listening and your continued support. And if you do choose to communicate with us, we appreciate that very much as well. I know Agnes is checking on it, but I did receive a comment after the program on Monday night, and the report I got was that the program went dead about 2:15, about 15 minutes into our second hour on Monday. And he said that he tried to to dial the alternative website, which is Head On Lives, and got it, but there was nothing on that website either. So whether in fact it was his computer or whether in fact it was something that happened here that we went off the air, Agnes believes that we have the whole program on archive. But the fact of the matter is, it's possible that we don't. I just don't know at this point. But what I thought I would do after I heard that, and I said, 45 minutes of our second hour, that was the whole Stevens article with Plato. And he said, yeah, you were just getting into that when everything went dead. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to repeat the whole 45 minutes by any means, because it's possible it's there. But I thought that I would review it anyway, since it's been a couple of days since we did that program. But also because I don't think there's anything wrong with emphasizing it, because I do believe that the message and the exposure to Plato's Phaedrus is something that's worth all of our time. And so I don't believe that emphasizing it or calling attention to it for a second time is a negative at all. So with that, I'd like to open the program with that. And then I want to get into a few of the major issues that are going on right now. I've got, again, 4 or 5 items that I think I could spend some time on. I know that we don't have that much time. We're on for 2 hours, which seems a lot, but on the other hand, when you get into some of these issues, it seems that the time just kind of flies by. So we never get to them all. But again, they'll always be here, and we can always return to them as well. To the Bret Stephens piece, which was in the New York Times. I believe it was dated, if I'm not mistaken, the 16th of November, which was at the end of last week. But the column was rebroadcast in Sunday's New York Times, which was the 18th. And so that would mean that the original appeared in the Times on Saturday, the 16th, and Sunday would have been the 17th. But whatever. The point was that the article was a piece dedicated or aimed at Facebook. And it was clearly linked to a report that came out last week from the New York Times on the problems that Mark Zuckerberg and the others at Facebook are having right now. And the fact that there have been a number of gaffes, if you might call them that, in Facebook. And Facebook has done the very best it can to try to put a positive face on some of these things, to reemphasize its mission, and do the very best it can to I use the analogy of fighting fires, to do the best it can, hoping that this negative publicity will pass over. But we know that it wasn't too long ago that when word leaked that there had been a breach and that millions of Facebook accounts were hacked, were released, Facebook suffered because the value of its stock plunged. And on paper, Facebook lost several $1 billion in stock reversion as a result of that particular problem. And so that's one of many. The Russian use of Facebook, the use of Facebook for negative purposes, for abuse and cyberbullying and all these other things. It seems to me that all of these things are problems that Facebook needs to face and needs to own up to. And I think that was Bret Stephens' point, that Facebook has tried to put a positive spin on much of this. But the fact of the matter is, Facebook really needs to regroup and rethink its mission and what it's about, and try to do the very best it can to fulfill the purposes for which Facebook was originally created. The idea was that Facebook was going to be a positive. It was going to open communications around the world, and it was going to basically make intercommunication possible between people much more plentiful. In other words, it was going to end up being a social plus for the world. It was going to be a positive. And the fact of the matter is, many negative things have happened with Facebook as a result. The availability of Facebook has given an opportunity to people who would misuse it and use it to their own selfish advantage, whether in fact it's to other people's advantage or not, is one of the things that Facebook really is going to have to deal with. That was really the issue that Bret Stephens was talking about. But in the process of making his point, he went back 2,400 years to Plato's dialogues in the Republic. And he extracted this story, this fable, a story that Plato tells about King Thamus of Egypt and the god Thuth, Theuth. Thuth had been responsible, according to Plato, Thuth had been responsible for a number of gifts to mankind already: arithmetic, astronomy, dice, other things. And Thuth was now offering the king of Egypt a new gift: the art of writing, the written word. And what he promised, of course, is that this would be a tremendous advantage for Egypt. It would improve memory, it would improve wit, it would improve people's ability to communicate with each other, it would improve literacy. In other words, it was clearly a very positive thing, Thuth believed. But as the story goes, Thamus turned down the gift. And his explanation for turning it down was, I think, particularly important. And he said the problem with the gift of writing, the art of writing, is that the written word becomes the substitute for the item itself. And what it's going to cause as a result is that instead of people directly engaging a particular issue or a particular subject, by being able to record it in the written word, you are able to, on the one hand, keep it for another time, but on the other hand, you're making it unnecessary to engage it. And the fact of the matter is that's going to be a negative, because the reality is what you are doing is exchanging the symbol of reality for the real thing. From Bret Stephens' perspective, that's what he believed Facebook has done. Facebook's original message was totally positive. Its mission is positive: to increase connectivity throughout the world, to bring people closer together and increase communication. That's what Facebook offers mankind. But in fact, a lot of negative things have happened which were clearly unanticipated by Facebook. And that's the message that Plato wants to emphasize from Plato's Phaedrus, that in reality, many times, many things end up being not only what was promised, but in fact the opposite of what was promised. Sometimes, in search of something that looks good, we embrace something that ends up creating bigger problem than the problem we thought we were originally solving. The reason that I wanted to emphasize this article is not so much because of the Facebook thing, which I do believe is important. I think Bret Stephens' message about Facebook is an important one. I think this whole issue of Facebook is so important because it clearly has become so important. It's become a political issue. If we think back to the Cambridge Analytica situation and the use of Facebook data, which became a political tool, which the Trump campaign bought into for the election of 2016, there's every indication that there's a psychological profile available of millions of Facebook subscribers. The program that was developed, if you recall, we dealt with this some months ago. The program that was developed was a program based on likes on Facebook. How many times have you heard the come on or the call, the advertisement for Facebook? Like us on Facebook. And there's a like button there that you can click when you see something on Facebook that you particularly like. And what this program did was essentially assess the likes of individual people and based on this data to develop profiles of the people involved. And so consequently, Cambridge Analytica was able to gain access unwittingly, unknowingly, because people didn't know this. They didn't know when they bought into this program and agreed to answer the questions on the initial survey that they were essentially revealing all the data of their Facebook friends as well. The result is that millions of personal profiles became available and became politically viable data that Cambridge Analytica was marketing to candidates, and President Trump was one of the ones that bought into this. This is the basis of the negative publicity that Facebook is, some of the negative publicity that Facebook is getting. But the reason I wanted to emphasize it on this program was because of what I believe is the educational message that Phaedrus brings to us. In other words, my thank you to Bret Stephens is for the brilliance that he had in bringing Phaedrus to our attention, because the message is so significant about the difference between symbol and the reality that the symbol represents is so important. And according to the story, King Thamus of Egypt believed that by accepting this gift, the art of writing, it would turn out to be more of a negative for Egypt than a positive. Thamus turned it down because he said, quote, "This gift will create forgetfulness in the learners' souls because they will not use their memories. They will trust to the external written characters and not remember themselves." In other words, they'll always have access to the information if they ever need it, because it's recorded in written form. But the fact that it's always available when they need it means that they won't take the time to engage it now. And by not engaging it, they don't learn from it. There's no knowledge generated as a result of an engagement that doesn't happen. And that seems to me the message here. Plato in Phaedrus goes on and gives a number of other examples of the same kinds of things. Plato tells us that the art of writing will result in a negative, namely, the people who hear or read these words will appear to be omniscient and will generally know nothing. They will be tiresome company, having the show of wisdom without the reality of wisdom. And then he goes on to give a number of other examples of the same kinds of things, what I called the dead end to knowledge that symbolism seems to create for us. Plato's examples: the painter, able to capture the perfect image of the real thing, but unable to answer any questions about that thing if somebody who sees his painting asks about it. Or the physician, so-called, who knows how to apply drugs, which shall have either a heating or a cooling effect, Plato says. But this so-called physician will not know to whom he would give the medicines and when and how much. In other words, the mere fact that you can dispense drugs doesn't make you a doctor, doesn't make you a diagnostician, as it were. And yet another one is the musician who thinks that he's a harmonist because he knows how to pitch the highest and the lowest notes, Plato says. Plato's response: this technique produces the preliminaries of harmony, but not harmony itself. In every one of these cases, symbol is replacing reality. My feeling is that this, in a way, helps us understanding some of the failings in our education system. Because it doesn't matter whether you're talking K through 12 or whether you're talking higher education. Many, many people are convinced that our education system is not producing at the level that we need it to, or at the level that it should be producing. And the fact that we continue to throw piles of money at education never seems to improve the situation at all. And this is my explanation of why I think Phaedrus offers us some really important insights into the challenges in today's classrooms. It seems, I've said, that, and this is the last posting that I put on Facebook, it seems that our classrooms, even at the highest levels, may have unwittingly slipped into a like situation similar to the one that Phaedrus is sharing with us. Some time ago, our classrooms ceased to be places committed to the pursuit of truth, and instead became a way to discriminate and classify students based on the grades they received. And that was the beginning of a process whereby grades ceased to be a means to reflect learning and instead became the objective. In other words, the person who took a particular class was more interested in the grade than what the grade represented. And once that becomes true, then it's easy to slide into the idea or the mental frame of mind. Well, if the only thing that matters is the grade, then the easiest way that I can get the good grade without working for it is okay. It'll work. In other words, once the means becomes the end, it perverts the whole process. And for many years, I've believed that our grading process is one of the major flaws in our education system, because we overemphasize grades. And the reason we do it is because grades are an effective way to discriminate among students, to validate the intelligence of one particular student, or to validate the lack of intelligence on the part of others. In other words, we basically use grades to characterize people, to define people, which is a total perversion of what grades in theory ought to be about. Grades are a shorthand way, a shortcut way to essentially assign a record of learning, a measure of the learning that has taken place. But once you separate the grade from the learning and make the grade the objective, the whole process becomes tainted. I don't have any problem with grades. I think grades are very helpful. They're an important symbol, but they are a symbol. They're a symbol of something else, which is learning. But once the grade becomes all that really gets the attention, and the learning kind of fades into the background, we begin to lose our way. I've always believed that the problem is the idea of using grades to compare one student with another. I think that's a very negative process, because it affects the learning process, the educational process itself. Because once the grade becomes the objective, then risk enters the picture. Students are afraid to be wrong. They're afraid to ask questions because they are afraid to betray the fact that they don't understand something. And the reason they do that is because they're afraid that if they reveal their own failings, it'll be reflected in the grade they receive. And so therefore, the best protection, self-protection, that the student can adopt is to never risk being wrong. Never volunteer. Don't ask questions, because you're revealing your weaknesses or your failings when you do that. All of that inhibits learning. But as long as we keep focusing on the grade, we never really appreciate that. We never really come to grips with the significance of that. How could grades be a positive? How could we fix this? It seems to me the way to do it is to assign grades developmentally. In other words, use grades to keep a written record of an individual student's progress, so that you can measure how much this student has learned from assignment to assignment to assignment to assignment. Because this becomes a record that people can really use. It basically demonstrates this particular student's ability to learn. to stick to a task to a degree of commitment, all of those things that are important. In other words, I think it's important that at the end of a course or a class, students are able to leave with a portfolio of their progress in that class. In other words, the first learning experience in this class that was evaluated received this grade because of the following reasons or deficiencies or whatever. The second one was this grade, and the third one when increased to this grade. In other words, what you are doing is demonstrating and measuring learning itself. What's the advantage of using grades that way? Learning remains the key objective. Learning remains the focus, not the grade. The grade merely reflects the degree of learning that has taken place at a particular time, which is originally what grades were supposed to do. So I don't think that grades per se are ineffective or a negative. On the contrary, I don't. They are only a negative when they are misused. And I think on a grand scale, we're misusing them I believe, to the detriment of students and to the detriment of the quality of education itself. That's what I see in Phaedrus. That's the message that I see. What we are after is engagement, challenge. In other words, going back to the story of Themis refusing the gift of the art of writing. What we really want is the direct engagement. We want students to wrestle with issues, to figure things out, to look positively at challenge, not try to find ways to avoid being challenged, but rather welcome challenge as the road to new knowledge, to more advanced knowledge. And I think that's what the good teacher does, is act as a coach as that process unfolds within a particular class. Plato, as we know, in Phaedrus and elsewhere, advocated the idea of the Socratic method, asking pointed questions in order to stimulate depth, stimulate curiosity, force engagement, and do those things which today we call critical thinking. In other words, we want to get students to become immersed in a particular challenge, in a particular problem, in a situation that they don't know firsthand, that they have to learn and understand. And in order to do that, they have to take it on, they have to embrace it, they have to employ the skills that they have in order to deal with resolving the particular issue or problem. That's the way they learn. Socrates, with the Socratic method, believed that the asking of these pointed questions, forcing people to confront their own beliefs so that they necessarily are forced to think about them, was the answer. And the particular paragraph in the Phaedrus that I think brings this home deals with the issue of what Plato calls in this particular dialogue the dialectician, the person engaged in the dialectic, confronting competing ideas, forcing the learner to confront competing ideas that challenge each other and figure out a way to work your way through that. Plato says the dialectician chooses a proper soul and plants and sows within it discourse accompanied by knowledge. Discourse capable of helping itself, as well as the man who planted it, which is not barren, but produces a seed from which more discourse grows in the character of others. Such discourse makes the seed forever immortal and renders the man who has it happy as any human being can be. This idea of discourse as planting the seed, very honestly, is the reason that I try to open every hour of our program with phone numbers, an email address, a Facebook page address, and an invitation for people to participate actively in the program. Because the way to knowledge is through discourse. It's through conversation. It's through interactivity. I've believed that for a long time, and I just find it exhilarating that Brett Stevens would bring to the fore one of Plato's dialogues, which brings this point home so directly. Again, I want to drop this particular subject here or end it, but I want to explain that the reason I did do this for the first half hour of our program today, or close to a half hour, is because of the fact that I did want to review what we covered on Monday, but also with the possibility that maybe we went off the air and I didn't even know it. I think this particular information, this particular point, was too important to risk not being covered. So I wanted to do it again, and I figured if it was a review, and in fact, if those listening had heard it on Monday, then it wouldn't hurt to kind of revisit the same thing for a second time.
Bill?
Yes, Agnes.
You know, we got it all sorted out, and everything was fine here. But you just said something, and you said it in a different way, and it kind of clicked about Facebook. Have you ever noticed that even with as much social media as we have, we don't talk to each other?
No.
We talk at each other, but we don't talk to each other. And
no.
Maybe communication has become a problem.
Right. Facebook was supposed to enhance it. But there's a distinct possibility, and I think that's what Stevens makes the point of, is that in fact, for some people, it has forced them, people have become so addicted to Facebook, to their computer, that it's made them less social than they would be without Facebook.
So
they become isolated, if you will.
Right. It squashes the curiosity. Because you're going through and you're looking at feeds, and there's not a whole lot of sharing of different ideas.
And the other thing, and you mentioned this, and boy, this is a key point, and this is the idea of talking at each other but not with each other. And that goes, talking with each other means that you're listening to what the other person is saying. And so often in today's world, we don't do that. What we're doing is we're preparing our next comment, not listening to what the person we're speaking with is saying.
Exactly. It's there's a breakdown. So what you said about grades and people taking it as a personal. If I make an A, it means I'm excellent.
Right. And
that's not the truth. The A means that you've learned the information that you needed to learn, but where's the curiosity in that?
Yeah, in theory, if it really measures the degree of learning that takes place, there's nothing wrong with it. But on the other hand, if all the person wants is the A, then if you can figure out a way to get the A without the learning, why not do it?
Right.
And that's what students are doing today in vast numbers.
And a lot of times for different reasons. If you look at a piece of paper and a grade, that grade has nothing to do with your potential.
No, not at all.
And I think that's what I came out with, is that the grade itself, they're taking that as that's their potential. If I get a C, then that means I'm substandard and I shouldn't try.
That means that at best, you're average.
That's a wonderful point.
And what that tells people, potential prospective employers and everything else, is that if we hire you for this particular position, the best we can get out of you is average performance.
My God, think Einstein would have just been a footnote, if that's the way it would have been considered.
Yeah.
He couldn't tie his shoes.
That's awful. When you think about what that does to people.
It grinds you down.
For one, it pigeonholes people. It classifies them. It separates them from other people who aren't average, and basically it costs people, it seems to me.
Well, it seems like it's cost humanity a great deal, because look where we are now.
Right. Yeah. God, I keep trying to figure where we are now, and I'm not sure I want to know.
Well, I think we got a really good bead on Alice in Wonderland. I'm going to let you finish. But
okay,
thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's an important subject, I think, and I think, and again, I go back to, and again, I'm pushing the same button I always push here, and I apologize, but I do believe this. I think the sources. I think when you go back to Plato, and you read the sources, you read the primary stuff, the historical documents, and you read and appreciate how much there was to what these people have to offer us if we would just go there and learn from it. But part of the fact of going there and learning from it is knowing how to do that. And that's, in theory, what our education system is supposed to be teaching us, is how to learn and how to address problems, how to address challenges, how to analyze a situation, how to do research, how to collect the evidence, how to decide which evidence is going to lead us to a solution and which evidence is going to lead us down a blind path somewhere that we don't want to go. And all of these skills that become so important, because the more of them we have, the more capable we are of teaching ourselves. We become self-learners or lifelong learners, or whatever the phrase is you want to use. And that's ultimately what we want people to be. We want people to be lifelong learners who know how to learn, so that when they run into a new challenge or a new situation, they're not blindsided by it, they're challenged by it. And they'll find a way through it. And they'll be an even bigger, more skilled person for that particular experience. In other words, skill building and learning is a cumulative process. We become better and better at it if we do it. The problem with grading is that it inhibits all of that. It inhibits the process. It makes the process too risky, because it could cost us a good grade. So to protect the grade, we duck the process. And we're costing ourselves more than we would ever know. I can't tell you the number of experiences I've had with students who've dropped my classes because they weren't sure they could get an A in the particular class, because it was going to be, they felt, from what I was saying at the beginning, It was going to be more of a challenge than they really wanted to risk. Think about that. Not only think about that mentality, that attitude, but think about the fact that there are other courses which offer a way around that challenge. In other words, students find other places to go to get what they need without ever having to engage that particular challenge. That's what scares me, is the fact that there's always a ready alternative. There's always somebody or someplace you can go which will allow you to find a way in, as it were. I find that particularly frightening and particularly dangerous. So I think this article is just incredible. I think the Phaedrus is just, as many of Plato's dialogues are, the issue of Plato's the dialogue, the story of the cave, and just the message that we can derive from that. I just think these things are absolutely incredibly important. But let me, and again, we've got just 7 or 8 minutes left in this, our first hour, and then we'll take our break and we'll get into some other things. But in the short time, in the 7 or 8 minutes that's left in this hour, one of the things I wanted to, there's so many things going on, obviously, as you know. The big item that's getting all the attention today is a New York Times story that became public yesterday, which suggests that earlier this year, President Trump had asked or was contemplating wanted the Justice Department to prosecute Hillary Clinton and James Comey both. And according to the story in the Times, McGahn, the president's attorney who just left the White House, the administration, if you remember, McGahn is the attorney who coached Brett Kavanaugh for the confirmation hearings, sat through the hearings, and then when Kavanaugh was finally confirmed to the Supreme Court, McGahn basically exited the administration. Well, this particular story in the Times goes back to the point when McGahn was actively engaged as an attorney within the administration. And when President Trump expressed his desire to have the Justice Department prosecute Hillary Clinton and prosecute James Comey, McGahn wrote a report to the president in which he sought to persuade the president that that was a very bad thing to do. It would expose the president to obstruction of justice charges and potential impeachment. And this is the story that's making its way through the major cable networks as we speak. It's getting all the attention, as to well it should. I wanted to mention it. I also wanted to make mention of why this is significant and what it tells us. It seems to me that this is additional confirmation of an important fact, of an important consideration. It's what forced Jeff Sessions to resign, or to be fired, if you will. He was asked to resign as Attorney General, because Jeff Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. Trump has never forgiven him for that, as we know. President Trump has said if he was going to recuse himself, why didn't he tell me, and I would have appointed somebody else as Attorney General? What made Trump angry was that Sessions accepted the appointment and then recused himself, which meant, and this is the point, I think this is my point, which meant that Jeff Sessions was not going to allow himself to become the mouthpiece for the president as Attorney General. Basically, the rules of justice, the rule of law indicates that if you have a conflict of interest, you must recuse yourself, because if you don't, the legal process itself becomes tainted. It can't work unless people are committed to the sanctity of the process. And the process, the sanctity of the process, requires that those who have a vested interest in a particular case need to make sure that they don't participate in deciding that case, because their decision, their participation, cannot be objective. Rather, it's self-interested, or it appears to be self-interested. And if there's even the appearance of self-interest, then the legitimacy of the final decision comes into question. People refuse to accept the decision as legitimate because they see that there was self-interest involved in a number of the people who were participating in addressing this particular problem. To Sessions' credit, he was unwilling to do that. And as Attorney General, he felt that his responsibility was to recuse himself from all matters related to the Russia investigation. The mere fact that the president became angered at Sessions for doing this says a lot about what the president believed the Attorney General's number one priority or responsibility is. Clearly, the president believed that his Attorney General was his representative, was his man. And the Attorney General's primary responsibility, Trump believed, obviously, was to protect the president. When in fact the Attorney General is not the president's attorney, he's the nation's attorney, he's the people's attorney. The mere fact that the president believed in the Jeff Sessions situation that loyalty to him took precedence over loyalty to the system of the rule of law itself is reinforced in this report that just came out yesterday in the New York Times. The president obviously believed that he could order the Justice Department to prosecute his political enemies. If indeed that were true, we wouldn't have a Justice Department. We wouldn't have a legal system. Because in effect, the Department of Justice would be a political arm of the administration. So in effect, the president's suggestion that he could use the Department of Justice to prosecute his political enemies is an impeachable offense. It's a violation of the oath to the Constitution of the United States that the president took when he was inaugurated. This is a big issue. It's an important issue. And it ought to be focused on. Not only for the issue itself, but for the additional insight it gives us into this particular president. This particular president believes that protecting him from potential negatives is the number one responsibility of everybody who works for the federal government, because in theory they all work for him. That's contrary to what our system of government is all about. It leads to something else, but I'm going to wait until the second hour to get into that, because we've reached the top of our first hour, and I'd really like to postpone this until we get into our second hour. We're 1 minute beyond the top of the hour, so let's take this opportunity to pause for a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll pursue this topic and others in our second hour on today's program here at the Virtual Center. We're just going to take a short break, so please stay with us. We'll be right back.
We now return to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Here's your host, Dr. Bill Obrien. Hello, Bill. Bill? And here we are.
I think we're back on the air. I seem to have lost my audio, and I'm not. Okay, apparently we're good. So I'm going to begin. Thank you. This is our second hour of the Virtual Center for study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. It's 9 minutes after the hour. We experienced some technical problems there. Skype went down, and we had a little bit of trouble reconnecting. I still don't have audio on my end, but video, I can't hear anything. But on the other hand, according to Agnes, you can hear me, so I'm going to keep going. Welcome to this, our second hour of the Virtual Center. Let me give you the phone numbers. We spent quite a bit of time in the first hour if you were with us. And if you weren't, welcome to our program. We spent the bulk of the first hour focusing principally on the Phaedrus Bret Stephens piece that we closed the program with on Wednesday afternoon. On this past Monday afternoon. And then we dealt a little bit with the issue that's currently getting all the attention on the cable networks, which is the report in the New York Times yesterday that President Trump actively made clear his intention to have the Justice Department prosecute his political enemies, namely Hillary Clinton and James Comey, and the degree to which his attorney, McGahn, persuaded him not to do that because it could be considered obstruction of justice and an impeachable offense. And that's getting all the discussion right now. We talked about that and how important it was. That's the way we ended our first hour for those of you just joining us. Let me give you the phone numbers again and invite you to join us on the air. We have two numbers, both of them the same area code 304. The first number is 304-574-8178. 304-574-8178. The other number is area code 304-640-2829. 640-2829. Or you can send an email to me, or you can get through to me directly on our Facebook page. My email address, if you choose that route, is waobrien906@gmail.com. Or you can go to our Facebook page, and in the search box at the top of the homepage, type in the Virtual Center for Study of the Constitution, and you will be onto our Facebook page. And then if you click on one of the comment buttons after each posting on our Facebook page, you'll have a direct line to me, to my Facebook page, and you can make the comment that you choose to make, whether it's related to the particular posting involved, or whether you just want to make it about something else that we talked about here on the Virtual Center. I think the last thing that I said before we broke for our break at the top of the hour, and I want to return to that, was the issue of the importance of this attitude of the president that everybody who works for the federal government owes principal loyalty to him, not to the system. In effect, what the president is implying is that the oaths of loyalty to the Constitution of the United States that many federal employees take when they accept office, whatever it might be, is meaningless. That the real issue is loyalty to him. We saw it in the firing of Jim Comey. We saw it in the dismissal of Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. We are now seeing it in this report that was in yesterday's New York Times about the president's desire to use the Justice Department to prosecute his political opponents from 2016, James Comey and Hillary Clinton. Every one of those, it seems to me, has a common thread, and that thread is loyalty to the president rather than to the nation, to the Constitution, or to the people of the nation. And I do believe, going back to the programs we did recently on the issue of impeachment, if you read what the founders who voted for the Constitution and voted for the impeachment clause in the Constitution, they would say that this particular attitude, this particular behavior on the part of the president is impeachable because it's a direct violation of the people's trust. It's a direct violation of what the people elected the president to be and to do. And that makes it an impeachable offense. There's one other issue that is getting front page attention actually, this has been going on since the 2nd of October. And what I'm talking about is the murder of Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul, Turkey. And we've seen the release by Turkey of detailed reports of the murder of Khashoggi and the allegations on the part of the Turkish government that all the evidence suggests that this was a planned murder and that it directly involved Prince Mohammed al-Salman, who is the heir apparent to the throne in Saudi Arabia. Also, you may remember that a few weeks ago, the tape of the assassination itself was delivered to the CIA, and it recounted the actual murder itself. And over the last couple of days, we've heard the president explain why he doesn't want to hear that tape, why he doesn't have to hear that tape. He knows it's horrendous. He knows it's violent. He doesn't need to hear it. But then yesterday, the president basically dismissed the conclusion of our CIA that Prince Mohammed was directly involved in the assassination, knew about it, ordered it, in fact, and President Trump's refusal to accept that, and his preference instead to accept the denials of the Crown Prince and to emphasize the importance of our relationship with Saudi Arabia to the principles raised in this particular issue, which is the inhumanity associated with planned murder. The president issued a statement yesterday on his stand on the Khashoggi affair. All the media is talking about it. All the media is making reference to it. We're hearing excerpts from the president's statement as the basis for commentary by commentators on on different sides of the issue, those who support the president and those who criticize him. It seemed to me the most important thing before we begin to even talk about this is to make sure we know what the president said before we criticize him. So what I did is I went and I got the president's statement. It was issued from the president. It's a statement from the president on standing with Saudi Arabia, dated November 20th, 2018. If you'll bear with me, it's not that long. Let me read what the president's statement says. Everything I'm reading from now on is the president's words. Quote, America first. The world is a very dangerous place. The country of Iran, as an example, is responsible for a bloody proxy war against Saudi Arabia in Yemen, trying to destabilize Iraq's fragile attempt at democracy, supporting the terror group Hezbollah in Lebanon, propping up dictator Bashar al-Assad in Syria, who has killed millions of his own citizens, and much more. Likewise, the Iranians have killed many Americans and other innocent people throughout the Middle East. Iran states openly and with great force, death to America and death to Israel. Iran is considered the world's leading sponsor of terror. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia would gladly withdraw from Yemen if the Iranians would agree to leave also. They would immediately provide desperately needed humanitarian assistance. Additionally, Saudi Arabia has agreed to spend billions of dollars in leading the fight against radical Islamic terrorism. After my heavily negotiated trip to Saudi Arabia last year, the kingdom agreed to spend and invest $450 billion in the United States. This is a record amount of money. It will create hundreds of thousands of jobs, tremendous economic development, and much additional wealth for the United States. Of the $450 billion, $110 billion will be spent on the purchase of military equipment from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and many other great U.S. defense contractors. If we foolishly cancel these contracts, Russia and China would be the enormous beneficiaries and very happy to acquire all of this newfound business. It would be a wonderful gift to them directly from the United States. The crime against Jamal Khashoggi was a terrible one, and one that our country does not condone. Indeed, we have taken strong action against those already known to have participated in the murder. After great independent research, we now know many details of this horrible crime. We've already sanctioned 17 Saudis known to have been involved in the murder of Mr. Khashoggi and the disposal of his body. Representatives of Saudi Arabia say that Jamal Khashoggi was an enemy of the state and a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. But my decision is in no way based on that. This is an unacceptable and horrible crime. King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman vigorously deny any knowledge of the planning or execution of the murder of Mr. Khashoggi. Our intelligence agencies continue to assess all information, but it could very well be that the Crown Prince had knowledge of this tragic event. Maybe he didn't, maybe he did, and maybe he didn't. That being said, we may never know all of the facts surrounding the murder of Mr. Jamal Khashoggi. In any case, our relationship is with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They have been a great ally in our very important fight against Iran. The United States intends to remain a steadfast partner of Saudi Arabia to ensure the interests of our country, Israel, and all other partners in the region. It is our paramount goal to fully eliminate the threat of terrorism throughout the world. I understand there are members of Congress who, for political or other reasons, would like to go in a different direction, and they are free to do so. I will consider whatever ideas are presented to me, but only if they are consistent with the absolute security and safety of America. After the United States, Saudi Arabia is the largest oil-producing nation in the world. They have worked closely with us and have been very responsive to my requests to keeping oil prices at reasonable levels, so important for the world. As President of the United States, I intend to ensure that in a very dangerous world, America is pursuing its national interests and vigorously contesting countries that wish to do us harm. Very simply, it is called America First. That is President Trump's statement on the Saudi Arabia situation, dated November 20th, 2018, yesterday. That's the full statement. Now, I think, we can begin to deal with the substance of that statement, with the meaning of that statement, with the choices being made in that statement. And I think they are extremely significant. Because from both sides, we are getting reaction. This is from the New York Times report, written by Mark Mazzetti and Ben Hubbard, about President Trump's statement. The New York Times article is entitled, "In Pardoning Saudi Arabia, Trump Gives Guidance to Autocrats." Here's an example of a positive reaction to the president's statement. This is from Mr. Abdul Khalik Abdullah, a political scientist from the United Arab Emirates. Trump will be viewed as a very courageous president who stuck to his guns and went against the Washington consensus, Abdullah said. Big thank you, Mr. President, from this part of the world. This firm stance will never be forgotten by Riyadh and the other Arab Gulf capitals, and will be reciprocated handsomely on many issues. The criticism of President Trump's statement that the president has basically sold out the principles on which this nation stands in exchange for a dollar. In fact, in exchange for $450 billion of business with Saudi Arabia, $110 billion of which is in military aircraft. It seems to me that the first thing we need to deal with is a disturbing reality. And that is that there is every indication that the president is fudging the numbers. Initially, his defense of Saudi Arabia in the Khashoggi murder was based on the $110 billion arms deal. Now it's $450 billion. Tens of thousands of jobs. Economic growth like we've never seen, the president is saying. There seems to be a growing consensus that there's no way in the world that Saudi Arabia is going to spend that kind of money in the United States. But there's something even more here. Even if they did, is major military arms deals, weaponizing the world, arming the world with sophisticated military hardware, is that the basis on which we want our economy to rest? Is that the basis on which we want so many of these jobs to rest? The fact that it already does, it seems to me, is a problem that's needed addressing for a long time. Think about, go all the way back to Dwight Eisenhower's farewell address when he was leaving the White House. And he warned the nation of the dangers of what he called the military-industrial complex. He warned the nation that the ideological struggles that had already emerged with the Soviet Union that we were labeling the Cold War posed a very dangerous problem to the United States, to the world, beyond the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union themselves. And that is that we would allow the threat of international communism to spark the kind of an arms buildup which would dictate that our entire economy became increasingly reliant on military hardware. President Eisenhower warned that if we reached that state, and obviously he believed we were rapidly approaching it, that would give inordinate influence in decision-making in this country to the arms manufacturers, to the contractors, the military contractors. President Trump has openly said in this statement that he is unwilling to forego $450 billion in business for a principle. And his justification? There is not definitive proof that the leadership of Saudi Arabia is guilty for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Even though our intelligence community, our own CIA, is convinced that the leadership of Saudi Arabia was directly involved in the murder of Khashoggi. Basically, what the president is saying is that the evidence of our intelligence community does not carry as much weight as the prospects for $450 billion worth of business with Saudi Arabia, as well as Saudi Arabia's continued allegiance to us and support of Israel in that region of the world. In other words, he has made a decision in the name of every one of us as citizens that irrespective of what we might think the right thing to do in this particular situation might be, he has chosen the business over the principle. Not only has he done that privately in conversations between this country and the leadership of Saudi Arabia, he has announced this principle to the world. In other words, he has announced to the world that no longer will the United States stand for the principles on which this nation was created. The value of human life. When President Trump said, even though so much evidence points to the fact that the Saudis did it, the Saudi leadership was complicit, the Crown Prince continues to insist that he wasn't. And President Trump's position on that is maybe he did, maybe he didn't. This is a decision that I think all of us have to understand, have to reflect upon, have to know about. Because this is a decision that future presidents, future administrations, future Americans are going to have to live with, I think, for a long time to come. Tom Friedman wrote on this issue in today's New York Times. The title of his article refers to something he called Trump's Black Friday sale: oil, guns, and morals. And Tom Friedman's thesis: President Trump will sacrifice America's moral standing in the world for a grotesque blood for money transaction. Friedman points out that many people believe that President Trump is behaving amorally in this. In other words, he's not allowing right and wrong, good and bad, truth and untruth, to affect a decision at all. That from his perspective, this is purely a bottom line decision. I would point out, in reference to the mention on Monday's program about the Pope Francis encyclical on climate and the degree to which bottom line decisions by corporations throughout the world were endangering the very planet we live on. This, according to Friedman, and I agree with it, this is clearly a bottom line decision. As President Trump himself says, it's an America First decision. It's a decision based on what's best for us, not what's right, not what's best for the world, not what's best for the Saudis, not what's best for Khashoggi's family, his fiancée. It's what is best for us. But the reality is, maybe it's not what's best for us. Rather, it's what's best for him. Maybe this decision is a plus for President Trump, but a decision that brings nothing to this nation. I think these couple of examples that Tom Friedman provides on this issue are important, because he talks about the situation and he raises the question as to whether President Trump is amoral, just merely amoral, or whether he's also a chump. Or even worse, is he an amoral chump? He's willing to sell out America's values. At the same time, he's not getting anything of value in return. And then he gives an example of the decision made earlier this year in May to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Yet another example of doing something that violated America's position on the Middle East, long-held position on the Middle East. And in effect, he's not getting anything back for it. He's not getting anything in return. Friedman said, Trump could have gone to Netanyahu and said this: Bibi, here's the deal. I'm going to make your dream come true and move the embassy. But in return, you're going to freeze Israeli settlements in the heart of the West Bank. If he had done that, Friedman said, Trump could have told the Palestinians, you're not going to like this, I'm moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, but I'm getting you something no American president ever got you: a freeze on Israeli settlements beyond the settlement blocks. But then Friedman points out he didn't get this. He got nothing from that concession of America's principles. The nation got nothing. But he did. He got millions of dollars in political support for the Republican Party from Jewish megadonor Sheldon Adelson, who lobbied for that particular move. He got applause from his evangelical supporters. So he got something. But America got nothing. The president goes on to say in the Khashoggi murder that this was a rogue operation that just happened to include key guards and aides of the Crown Prince, but the Crown Prince knew nothing about it. Friedman said, wait a minute. Attention. There has never been a rogue operation by the closest aides and guards of a Saudi leader in the history of Saudi Arabia. Not possible. This is an absolute monarchy. This was ordered from the top. That's the issue that President Trump refuses to acknowledge. Because if he did, then he couldn't have issued the statement. He's got to deny that they were involved. If you remember in Helsinki, in the president's appearance with Vladimir Putin, the same thing occurred. The Justice Department and the CIA, America's intelligence community, beyond doubt, had enough evidence to claim that absolutely the Russians and Vladimir Putin were directly involved in interfering with America's 2016 elections. The evidence was overwhelming. If you remember President Trump's statement, he said that Vladimir Putin denied that involvement in the strongest terms possible. Therefore, there's a difference of opinion. And he said, I choose, without corroborating evidence, to lean towards Mr. Putin, because he believed that positive relationships with Putin and Russia were to America's advantage, even if it meant that he had to turn his back on the evidence of his own Justice Department. Friedman gives some advice. The reason I'm linking it to him is because he said it. But the fact of the matter is, this was going to be the point that I made on the program today anyway, on this particular issue. I was kind of, a little bit surprised, not totally, when I read Tom Friedman's piece, because he was saying so much of the things that I was intending to say. I don't know whether that validates me or validates him, or whether it validates either one of us. But let me quote Friedman, and then let me explain exactly what I think this is all about. Probably the thing that disturbs me most about this whole situation, besides the Khashoggi murder itself, I mean, it seems to me, let's be honest, I believe that not coming down hard and taking a strong position before the world on the inhumanity associated with this murder and the dismemberment and all the excuses and changes in story that followed it is despicable. I don't think we as a nation can afford to squander and turn our backs on everything we've always stood for in the world, no matter how big the arms deal is. Friedman makes the point that let's suppose instead of military hardware, the Saudis were going to invest $450 billion in bringing education on the principles of open government and the rule of law and the pursuit of justice throughout the Middle East, with the importation of colleges, community colleges, and all the rest of it. In other words, what if $450 billion was invested in this country in education, in healthcare? That might be something that would be worth debating. But more planes, more warfare, more death, more killing, more terrorism, I don't know. The fact of the matter is, whether you believe he's our president or not our president, he is. And he has made this decision in our name. And we have to do something about it. He's not only representing himself, he's representing every citizen of this country. This is the way Friedman explains it. We need to make clear to the world that he does not represent us. His despicable, immoral, unethical statements and behaviors do not represent American values or how America behaves with our friends or even with our enemies, unquote. That's the point that seems most important to me. The president has gone too far, I believe. In our name, he has taken a position which I believe is contrary to what most people he's speaking for actually believe or would do in a similar situation. He's making a choice which I believe the majority of American citizens would not make. Yet he's making it in their name. The only way to deal with this is to counter that decision, to challenge it, to openly and loudly proclaim the alternative. That we continue to abide by the principles which have always defined the priorities of this nation, in spite of what the President of the United States has done or said. That, I think, is critical. I mentioned earlier that the fact that it doesn't seem possible that Saudi Arabia would actually spend $450 billion in the United States. There's substantial evidence to support this. there's evidence to suggest that the president is inflating the numbers in order to justify his decision. That in reality, the Saudi investment is much lower than that. And then there's one additional issue here, and it's the issue of oil. President Trump's mention in his statement about the degree to which we've been able to work with the Saudis in order to keep oil prices under control and manageable. And what this means for the world. Let me be realistic, what this means for him. Since the oil crisis in the 70s and America's commitment to become more independent in energy, the United States has become the major producer of oil in the world. The Saudis are second. But they still produce enough oil to directly impact oil prices. President Trump makes the statement that if we didn't have the Saudis working with us on this, the price of oil could escalate to $150 a barrel. That would create a crisis in this country. That would cost the president re-election. The response or the answer to this? We need to find an alternative to oil. We have got to find a way to break free of a dependency on Middle Eastern oil, because it is making us a pawn in international politics. It's making us a pawn in the struggles between Iran and the Saudis in the Middle East. It's making us vulnerable. Indeed, it's forcing us to make decisions that we ought not to be making. And I think this particular decision that the president made in our name is an example of that kind of decision. I really believe that clean energy, the end of fossil fuels being the primary source of energy in the world, has to happen. We have got to reverse what we're not doing in the nature of climate. I think we see it in California, in the fires, in the floods, in the extreme severity of the hurricanes and the typhoons in the Pacific that we're seeing. We're seeing dramatic extremes, which are literally changing the way of life throughout the world. If we are in any way having an impact on those changes, and the scientists tell us we are, then we've got to reverse what we're doing. We can't risk it. The survival of mankind depends on it. As we kind of move towards the end of our program today, we got maybe a minute and a half left in today's program. Let me say, as I think back to what we've touched upon in this hour, in this program for the two hours, seems to me immense. We've talked about principle. We've talked about standing up for principle. We've talked about standing up and not allowing a president in our name to side in decision-making internationally that violate everything that this nation stands for, that violates our values, our principles, our ideals. It kind of suggests that there are some very important things and some very important principles and decisions being made in this nation right now. Really important ones. We talked about the midterms. For a long time, we talked about the importance of the midterms, which were held earlier this month. It seems to me that we've gone beyond that. We got the kind of reaction, the kind of result in the number of House seats that flipped that indicate, and state level changes as well, that indicate that we might be coming to the conclusion of this story, to this chapter in our nation's history. I sure as heck hope so. We've reached the end of our program. We're less than 1 minute left before we get to the top of the hour. Let me take this opportunity not only to thank you for your support of the program, but more important, to enjoy tomorrow's holiday. I hope that you and yours have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I think it's very important not only to reflect that, spend time in reflection, in self-reflection yourself, so that you will come to appreciate the most important things in life to you. For Bob Kincaid and Agnes at the Head On Radio Network, and for me, Bill Obrien, have a wonderful holiday. Thank you so very much for your continued support. We'll see you again the first of next week in a new week of broadcasting. Thank you.